Hello viewers, welcome back to my channel. Today we will be talking about the study data review guide, that is the SDRG or the SDTM dataset, which we use as one of the document for our submission package in for the SDTM dataset. The SDRG is the roadmap that explains your study data in plain, simple language. While define.xml gives technical metadata, the SDRG tells the story behind your data, the context, the decisions, and even the challenges faced during the preparation of the SDRG. In this video, we will break down what the SDRG is, why it's essential, and how it helps reviewers understand your submission more effectively. We will also discuss one or two interview questions that can be asked related to the SDRG in this video. So make sure you watch this video complete to know all the details about the SDRG. Right now, I'm showing you the template of the SDRG, which we can use to create the SDRG for our study. This template is provided by the CDISC organization and is the standard document. So from the beginning, the first page will be the title of the SDRG, that this is the clinical study data reviewers guide. And then we can mention the sponsors here, sponsor name, the study protocol number, and other details about the study. Here we are also going to mention the template version of the SDRG and with the date time format. Let's compare it with one of the examples from the dummy study, that which we can see how the dummy study, what the SDRG was created. So right now, here again, I'm showing you the dummy SDRG which is created, and you can see this is again the CDISC provided SDRG, and it is for the dummy data to give you an idea how you can prepare the SDRG. So we have the SDRG study data reviewer guide mentioned. Then we have the study name. Here it was a pilot study name or the dummy study name that is being mentioned here. So similar way. Now coming to the next content here, based on the template, we will have the contents table, and in this table we will have all the information which is going to be mentioned in the SDRG. So right now, what I will suggest you is when you are working on the SDRG, you can take this template and you can update the each individual content part, that is the introduction, the other sections, which is the protocol description, study data description, and so on. And once you are done with all the updates, then you can come back to your contents table, and here you can just using the world features, you can update the contents table automatically instead of adding the subsections or the page numbers manually. So here also you can see that we have the content tables where all the sections and subsections are being mentioned in the SDRG for the dummy study. There are many domains also mentioned here in the section 3.4, which we will going to understand how and why we are displaying this information in the SDRG. So moving on from the content table, we will go to the next section, that is the section 1 or the section 2, you can say, that is the introduction part. In introduction part, we have subsections as well. So when we talk about the introduction part and subsection part 1, that is the 1.1, which is the purpose, this is something which you can keep as it is in your SDRG from the template, as this section mentions that this document explains the datasets and terms in a way that gives extra details which are not fully covered in the define.xml file. It also includes a short summary of any issues or problems found when checking whether the SDTM dataset follow the required rules or conformance or not. So the text which is mentioned here can be kept as it is in your study SDRG as well. However, if you want to modify, you are free to modify that as well. Then next section comes the acronyms here, and In this section, all the acronyms which are being used in your study can be mentioned in this section. For example, right now, which the template is giving is the acronym ACRF or the EDT, ECRF, all these parameters. You can mention the acronyms and translations. If we see the dummy study file here, in this study, the only acronym used was the ISR, which is the injection site reaction. Next comes the third section, which is not the third section, but the third subsection of the section 1, that is study data standards and dictionary inventory. So while working on your data or your SDTM, you will be using some control terminologies, MEDRA versions, and other standards. So what you have to do in this section is that you have to mention all the versions which you have used for this study. For example, the first version which is mentioned is for the SDTM. When we are working on SDTM, we might be using some particular version of the SDTM IG. So whether we are using 3.2, 3.3, 3.4, or whichever version you are using, you have to mention the version which is used for the SDTM IG, the control terminology. Few of you might know that the control terminology is being released every 3 months in a year. So based on the control terminology version which you have used in your study, you have to mention the versions here. Similar is the case for the other dictionaries or definitions which you are using, whether you are it's a MEDRA version or Who Drug dictionary versions. And if you are using any standards, other standards apart from the CDISC SDTM, then you have to mention those as well. Right now, I'm showing you this section from the dummy study again. Here you can see that this dummy study was built on the SDTM version 3.2, and they have used the 2020 December version of the control terminology. And for define.xml file, they have used the 2.1 version. And for the SDTM IG MD, they have used the 1.1 version. Similarly, you can also mention for the dictionaries, but please note that for the dummy data, they are not coding any terms, so they have mentioned that medications were not coded or the medical events were not coded. Now moving on to the next section, that is the protocol description section. In the protocol description section, the first section is the protocol name, a number, and title. So in this section, you will mention the protocol number, protocol title, and if there are multiple versions of the protocol where the amendment to the protocol was done to reflect any changes in the collection of data, which will impact the collection of data from the previous version, then all those versions should be mentioned in this section. You can get all this information from your protocol here. In this protocol number, we have the dummy study protocol number and the title of the study. And in this study, there was amendment done to the protocol. And as you can see here, that we have first mentioned the original version and then the amended versions and its date. And for the amended versions, we have also mentioned the changes that was done in the amendment. A little brief 1 or 2 liner statements of the amendments that was done in this section. The next section is the protocol design. So this protocol design is the information which you can get from the study design of the protocol. In the study design of the protocol, many protocols have graphic display of the study design as well, along with the text part of the study design. So in this protocol design, if you have the graphic information from the protocol, you can copy that information from protocol and have that pasted here also, along with the little bit 2-3 liner statements to explain the study design in this section. Now, here you can see that for this study, they have given the graphic information of the study design, and then they are also explaining in text part that this study was a phase 2 multi-center randomized double-blind placebo-controlled parallel group study. And Then they are also giving a little bit information about how the treatments was given, how the subjects was randomized, and what was the element information at the beginning and the end. All these little bit information they have given in the protocol design. All this information which you are right now has going to need to populate for the protocol designs can be taken from the protocol for the study design section. The third subsection of the second section is the trial design dataset. So right now, many studies are most of the studies are the subject studies, but some studies are the studies where you do not have the trial design dataset. So the first question that we need to answer in the third section of the protocol information is that are trial design dataset included in the submission? If they are included, then the only response we can have is the yes here, and if no, then we can remove the next subsections for this 2.3 section here. If the answer is yes, then we will have to provide a little bit information about all the trial design dataset which we have included in our study. So in those section, we will have the trial arms, trial element, trial visits, the TI and TS. Please note that for the TI, you can definitely mention that all the inclusion exclusion criteria are mentioned in the Appendix 1 of this document, because Appendix 1 is the section of this document where we will go and see that all the inclusion exclusion criteria are populated or being displayed or mentioned in detail, or the complete text of the criteria are mentioned in this section. Many times people say that when we are capturing the test values, the IE test values in your inclusion exclusion domain or in the TI domain, the complete text cannot be mentioned because of the restriction of 200 characters in the IE test variable. So where exactly we have the complete information for the inclusion exclusion criteria. So this is the section where you have the complete text information of the inclusion exclusion criteria which is used in your study. So once you have mentioned the details of your trial design data sets and a little bit information on these trial data sets, you can fill this information. The next is the subject data disposition. In this section, you will be displaying about what are the data sets which we have where we are capturing our subject data, and if there is any further information which we want to mention regarding each respective SDTM dataset, we can add that as well. So in subject data description, the first is the overview, and here we are going to answer these questions, that is, are the submitted data taken from an ongoing study? So if your study is ongoing, then you can mention the response as yes, and you can provide some other details that it's a ongoing study. You might have used a data cutoff date to get the data which you are submitting to the FDA. So you can mention that cutoff date in this section, that this is the cutoff date based on which you have cut the data and has submitted the cut data to the submission authorities. Next, their question which comes here is, were the SDTM data used as source for the analysis dataset? The next step when we create the SDTM dataset is the creation of your ADaM datasets or the TLF outputs. So if you are using this CDISC standards, then you will be using the SDTM dataset as your input for your ADaM datasets, and sometimes even for your few of the outputs as well. So if that is the case, then you will answer this question, that is, were the SDTM dataset used as source for the analysis dataset, as yes. And if no, if we are not using the SDTM dataset, which is the case for many of the non-CDISC standard studies where you are not following the CDISC standards, then the SDTM will not be used for the analysis dataset, and some only the raw datasets directly can be used. In that case, if you are still creating the SDRGs, then the response will be no, and you will provide the reason or the source of the analysis dataset. Do the submission dataset include screen failures? The screen failure information is something which we capture in your DM, DS dataset. So if you are keeping the screen failed subject data in your datasets, in the SDTM datasets, then the answer will be yes. And if you are not keeping those, the answer will be no. But however, if you are keeping the screen failure subject data in your dataset, then you will have to give the details of the datasets where you have the screen failure data. Were any domain planned but not submitted because no data was collected? This question is more valid for the domains where, not domains, but for the study which is ongoing, because sometimes there can be a scenario that although we expect the data to be populated or to be collected for a few of the domains, but since the study is still ongoing and till their cutoff date time, we do not have any data collected for those domains or those scenarios. For examples, based on the CRF design, we might populate some subqual information that the response to a question is captured in a subqual, and we will, if once the response is captured, we will create the subqual. But that will depend whether the data is collected or not till the data cutoff time. If the data is not collected for the subqual information, then those domains were planned, but since the data was not collected till now, we are mentioning that yes, there was that for these domains we were expecting some data, but till now we do not have those data collected. So that in those cases, we will mention the response as yes, and we will also give the information of the domains for which these data was not collected but was planned. Are the submitted data of a subset of collected data? If we are submitting the data or we are creating the SDTM on the dataset, which is again a subset of the collected data, then the response is yes, otherwise it will be no. And similar is the case that if adjudication is data is present, then we can mention it as yes, otherwise we can mention it as no. And if we have any additional information which we want to mention, then we can add in the additional content of interest section here. The next section is the traceability flow diagram. Let me explain this with the example from this dummy study. So for the section 3.1 overview, you can see that for this dummy study, we have the response populated. And if we go to the section where the question was asked for domains planned but not submitted because of no data, you can see that in this dummy data, they have used this subqual sub-OE domain as the domain which was planned, but no OE findings was considered clinically significant. So the subqual dataset was not created. Similar is the case for NV, that is the nervous system findings, for which nothing was submitted as no EEG was performed till this time. So similar way you can see from your data and accordingly mention here. Now coming on to the section 3.2, that is the traceability flow diagram. Here you can see what diagram, how we are going to populate in our study. We know that for our study, the data is either collected using the CRF or the electronically transmitted data. So if that is the case, then the for SDTM, there will be two type of data. The input will be two type of data, that is the eCRF data or the EDT data. EDT data is also sometimes known as the vendor data. So since we are using both these type of data, we can see that for in SDTM, we are using these two types of data as the input. And in this study, we have mentioned that the ADaM dataset was created on SDTM dataset. So that because of that, ADaM will be uh, created from SDTM, and SDTM will be the input from ADaM, and so on for the TLFs, and finally the CSR. So in this way, you can draw the traceability flow diagram and populate the 3.2 section here. Next is the annotated CRF section. And in this section, you can give the information of the CRF forms which were either updated or modified, amended during the study of the during the study ongoing, and there were either new CRF being added or modified. All those information you can mention. And if there are any fields because of these amendments that which you have marked as not submitted, then you will have to provide the details of the CRF forms which were marked as not submitted and the reason why these was not submitted. In the dummy study, if you see the example, they have mentioned that for the vital signs data, that is the VS pages, during the trial, there was addition done to the pulse and blood pressure measurement, and one page was also collected for temperature, one for temperature and weight, and one for collected weight, height, and uh, temperature. So for all these pages, these were updated during the trial at the end of 2012. So the updated versions have the pulses and blood pressures. So all the versions of the CRF are included in the CRF forms and bookmarked to indicate the various versions. So if you see all annotations of not submitted were prompt questions, we do not include as the part of this SDTM data. So what they are doing is by this statement, they are mentioning or justifying the not submitted form CRF forms, that why those CRF forms were not submitted. So, and they are also giving the snap of the modified vital signs page. So you can see that we have the measurements for the blood and pressure included. For the other ones, we have only the blood pressure information in the different positions being captured in the CRF form. Next section is the 3.4 section, which talks about the SDTM domain, subject domains. This is one of the important domain because in this section, we will list down all the SDTM datasets which we have in our study. So in this first column, that is the dataset or the dataset label, we will give the information of all the SDTM datasets which we have in our study, and in the whether that dataset is the safety dataset or efficacy, or it is a custom dataset, is a subqual datasets, these are related using RELREC or not. So if any of these, whichever field it is satisfied, we will mark it as an X. Sometimes one dataset can be satisfied for both. That is, it is safety also, and it is related with RELREC also, and we do have a subcol also. So in that case, all those columns will have the value of X for that particular dataset. So in this, we will display all the SDTM datasets present in our study. And the next thing is, you might observe that for few of the information which few of the dataset which we are displaying here, there is a hyperlink, and for few we do not have a hyperlink. Why it is so? So once we have listed down all the datasets present in our study, if we have some other further clarification on the data which is captured in that particular domain, we will have the respective subsections as well. And if we do have a subsection, for example, in this template example, they have mentioned that we have a subsection for adverse event. We will create a hyperlink for the adverse event here. So if you click here, it will let me click on to the exposure. It will go to the exposure section here. So this is the hyperlink which we have created, and in the subsections for each dataset where we want to add some information, we can mention. Coming back to the dummy study, you can see here that for this study, we have set this many SDTM domains being created. And you can see that for adverse event, we have a rel also created, and the A is being related to DD, DS, and FA domain. So in this way, you can mention all the related rel which are being used. And if you take example of DM, we have a sub DM also, and DM is something which is not a safety or efficacy domain, and it is definitely not a custom domain. So that's the reason the X is marked for the other category here. So in this way, you can have this table created. And now moving on to the hyperlinks and seeing the data, what information we can populate. Coming on the adverse event. So in this study, what they have done is they are providing some information that for adverse events, there are two AEs CRFs. One was capturing the AEs, one for injection site reactions, and the other for the spontaneously reported AEs only. So based on this, they are mentioning that the AE terms for ISR defaults to this injection site reactions, while the details of reaction pains uh, in duration, etc., are contained in the FA domain. RelRec is used to show the relationship between these domains. So they are providing some little information that for AE, we are capturing the AE from two different forms, and for one form, we have the AE terms being pre-annotated, you can say, to injection site reactions only, and that in all the A's related to that AE terms are being related with FA domain, and a RelRec is being created. So they are providing some little more details which is not mentioned anywhere else. Similarly, if you talk about the DM dataset here, they are giving the information for the race subquals, that since we are having multiple race subquals populated, what is the race 1 to race 5 and what are their descriptions. And so in this way, you can mention or some further details of the datasets which you have, which is not expected or which is different from what is expected from the data collection point of view. Sometimes there are some data entry issues for few subjects, and till the time we are submitting the as submitting the data set to the approving authority, we do not have the time to resolve those issues, so we can do the mention the information of those data issues in this section, that for so and so subjects, this is the data issue, and because of this reason, these data issues are not resolved as of now, and will be resolved later on. So that type of information you can definitely mention here. You can mention here also in this dummy study, you can see that we have split the questionnaire forms to two questionnaire forms. So they have provided the information that the questionnaire QSPH is the questionnaire for patient health questionnaire 9, and whereas the QSSL is the satisfaction with life survey data. So all this information is providing further details about the information which is being captured in your respective domains, SDTM domains. Now moving to the next section, that is the section 4, data conformance summary. This section will contains all the summary of checks done to see if the SDTM dataset follows CDISC rules and FDA requirements. Any error, warnings, or issues found when running validation tools will be mentioned in this section. Whether those issues were fixed or left as it is, we will also mention those, and we will provide the reasons or justifications why those were left as as it is also. This section helps the reviewers understand if the data is trustworthy, consistent, and ready for analysis. So now let's see what are the type of conformance checks we have in this section. The first of all is the section 1, which is the conformance inputs. And here we have few questions which we have to answer as yes and no, as we have done earlier in the previous sections as well. So the first is, was a validator used to evaluate conformance? So if we are using the validation, then we will mention a response as yes and specify the version of the validation rules. Normally, we will use the Pinnacle 21, so we can definitely mention that we are using the Pinnacle 21 tool to validate our outputs. And we can also provide the little information on how we have performed the Pinnacle 21 check in this case. Apart from the Pinnacle 21, if there are any sponsor-defined validation tools also used, then we can mention those as well in this section, in this part of the section. The next is, were the SDTM dataset evaluated in relation to define.xml? Again, this is something which is coming back to the Pinnacle 21, because Pinnacle 21 have a facility to validate the define.xml separately as well as along with the dataset. So if we are evaluating our SDTM datasets along with our define, then we can provide the response as yes. And if we are only, again, there is a second question, which is, are we evaluating the define.xml as well or not? So if we are doing that, then we can mention it as yes here also. And if we have any additional compliance evaluation information, we will provide in this section here. In the section issue summary, what we will have all the checks which are being fired in your Pinnacle 21 tool report. We can mention all those here, which will have the information of datasets, the messages, the severity, and the number of records for that, for which the particular check is being fired. And we can provide a little explanation why this check is fired and why it is not resolved or cannot be resolved here. In section 4.3, we will provide additional details. So till now, what we have done is, we have, for a particular check, we are giving only the count here, but in this additional check, we can provide further details like the subject-wise detail or the record-wise details as well, and explain those checks, why those checks are being fired. Now let's go to the dummy SDRG here to see how it can be populated. So right now, for the conformance input section, we can see that this dummy study had a conformance check been done. And although since it's a dummy study, they are not specifically mentioned which tool they have used, but they are giving the information on how they have done the conformance check. They have used the XPT files along with the defined XML documents, and it was done programmatically by the SDTM MSG team for this study. But since for our study, the mostly common method which we use is the running of the Pinnacle 21 tool from the XPT files and the define XML. You can mention the same here. In the issue summary, you can see they have populated the information which normally we can be seen from the Pinnacle 21 report here. For example, they have seen that for AE dataset, the publisher ID, that is the check ID, which is being fired, and the message which the check is giving, and severity count, and a little explanation that why this check was fired and why it is still unresolved, or it cannot be resolved information. So you can see the details of this being populated in this dataset. They have not provided any additional conformance details, and it is not a mandatory field again. But if you have any additional information which you want to add in this section based on your study, you should do that. Now coming on to the appendix section of the SDRG. The first appendix is the appendix information, which is the inclusion-exclusion criteria. So in this appendix 1, we will mention all the inclusion exclusion criteria which are used in our study. We will have the protocol or the amendment versions, the category, that is whether it's inclusion, exclusion, then the I test CD which we have created, and the detailed description which is the I test. But here there is, since there is no restriction on the character length, we will have the full text of the criteria. Please note that for a protocol which has undergone amendments in the because of the amendments done to the inclusion exclusion criteria, for those type of amendments, first we will mention all the originally mentioned like the initial version of the protocol, the original version which we mentioned, all the criteria mentioned in that version, and then we will mention all the again repeat all the criteria which is present as a part of the next amendments. So to explain it further with an example, let me show you the dummy study SDRG here. So here you can see that firstly what they have done is they have provided for the originally drafted protocol, and they are giving the details of the category test and test criteria, full text of the criterias here. But since there was an amendment done to this protocol, which we have seen in the first section above at the start of this document, we will have an amendment section as well. So all of these right now, they are displaying all the original inclusion exclusion criteria which were used in the protocol, and then in the next step they will add the amendments also. So here you can see that for amendments, that is the first amendment or the second amendment, they will list down again all the inclusion exclusion criteria, even if the inclusion criteria, say for example this criteria, it was not amended or was not changed from original version to amendment 1 version, but some other say for example this version was changed, then also we will mention all the criterias again with the amendment 1 as the first version. So here you will list down again all the criterias for amendment 1. And if you have further amendments like amendment 2 and so on, then you will list down all those as well in this section. So you can see that all the amendments, all the criterias are mentioned in the amendment 1 as well. And the ones you can see here, this was the amended version, amended criteria for exclusion criteria. So what they have done is they have used, they have the initially mentioned version as well, and then we have the amended version as well in this section. So you can see if it is not coming in one page, they are mentioning it as continuous for the second page as well. So in this way, you can have the protocol protocol inclusion exclusion criteria mentioned in this document. In this appendix 2, which is the next section, as per the template, if you want to provide some further details on the conformance checks, which we have checked in section 4, you can add those details here in this appendix 2. So in this way, you can create your SDRG for your study and have the document used in your submission package for SDTM. After you have completed all the updates for the SDTM, like adding all the sections, or even if after adding you want to update, once you are done with the updates and completed with the text part, you can come back to your content page, and here you can use the world feature of updating the index. If you right click here and select the update, it will update all the fields with, if there are any subsections included, it will automatically add those subsections and will update the page number as well. So having discussed about the SDRG, let's understand or go through few of the questions which can be asked related to the SDRGs. Mostly sometimes the interviewers can ask that if what is the difference between SDRG and ADRG. Whoever has worked on ADRG or who are working on the ADaM dataset will be aware that we, similar to SDTM, we also create a analysis data reviewer guide for ADaM dataset as well. So the only difference which we can tell from uh, between these two datasets is that SDRG is created for the SDTM dataset and it contains the study level data collection and trial design information, whereas the ADRG explains the ADaM datasets and is used for the analysis level or the derived endpoints or the statistical use information is being mentioned for in the ADRG. Many do ask that why we need SDRG if we already have the define.xml. You might have noticed that all the information which we are mentioning here is also mentioned in your define.xml in one or the other format. So why we need a separate document that is the SDRG if we already have a define.xml. So here, if you notice the define.xml is the technical metadata, or in other words, it's a machine readable document, whereas the SDRG is the narrative explanations and is human readable document. And SDRG also add context, decisions, and issues that define.xml cannot show. The SDRG is a document which helps provide the reviewers provide clarity and background about the data, highlight issues, deviations, or limitations. It saves reviewers time by giving a clear roadmap to understand the datasets on what are the other issues we have encountered while working on the studies, which are the open issues and which cannot be resolved. All those type of issues you can mention in your SDRG for reviewers to have the complete information. Now that brings the end of this session on the SDRG. We learned that while the define.xml provides the technical metadata, the SDRG plays a critical role in giving reviewers a clear narrative explanation of the study data. Please remember that the SDRG is not just a formality. It's a tool that helps regulatory reviewers navigate your data with ease, ensuring a smoother and faster review process. If you find this video helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content on CDISC, SDTM, and ADaM programming. If you have any questions or doubts, please let me know in comments. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.